Planning board is now in session. Everybody could just calm down in the audience. We'll be ready to start. First item on the agenda is the public hearing continued from November 19th for 0 Furman Ave, major site plan approval. I'll ask the town planner to give us the latest on the status of this public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I need to recuse myself from this part of the meeting, I believe. Well, I'm just going to go sit in the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. This isn't going to take very long, I don't think.
Okay, the public hearing for 0 Furman Ave opened on November 19th, at which time they presented their project for a storage facility to be redeveloped into 0 Furman Ave, which was currently office space. In the interim, they received a review from our town consultant, Fussin O'Neill, with comments that need to be addressed. We had received shortly after or at the same day of the last meeting, response comments from Beals and Thomas, the applicant's engineer, addressing some of those comments, but it was just in an email. Since then, we've not received any revised submission of plans, but I know that they're working on them, and hopefully they'll be in this week. That's why you haven't seen a distribution of new plans. At which time, Fussin O'Neill, the reviewing consultant, will continue a follow-up review. In the interim, knowing their timing was not going to make this evening's meeting, they've asked for, they're requesting the planning board grant them an extension to continue their public hearing for major site plan approval to our upcoming January 7th planning board meeting, with action to be extended by the planning board to January 11th. And that's where we are. We have their attorney who's representing Americo Real Estate Company, the applicant, signed this request for an extension, and we have an original here that can be signed by the chairman if you vote to grant that extension.
And the applicant's attorney's name is Brian Leary, correct?
Levy, L-E-V-E-Y.
Okay.
Yeah.
Levy, L-E-V-Y. Okay, Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we extend the public hearing for major site plan approval for 0 Furman Ave. Extend the decision period until January 11th, 2019, end of business, for 0 Furman Ave, major site plan approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we extend the public hearing for 0 Furman Ave, major site plan approval to January 7th at 7 p.m. Correct?
Correct.
That's it.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. Takes care of that item. We'll see them on the 7th. Next item on the agenda is a discussion, 325 Turnpike Road, which is Ken's Food, and changes to the site plan. I asked the town planner to give us a little update on this one.
Okay, you may recall last year, Scott Doty representing John Crow Associates, representing Ken's Foods at 325 Turnpike Road, came before the board with major site plan approval and special permit for lower impact development for some paving and draining changes at their site at 325 Turnpike. That they received their approvals, they went into construction, and they were moving along. They had also gone through conservation. In October of this year, I got indication that some changes were being proposed to this approved site plan during construction. So I contacted Mr. Doty and asked him to kind of summarize what was going on there. I had seen some plans through conservation with some changes to the paved areas, at which time I also saw some additional lighting to the project. So I felt it was important that they kind of address that, come forward and explain to the planning board what their changes are. It was my thought that these changes may be significant enough to warrant a modification to a site plan approval. So Mr. Doty is here today to explain how he got here and what he's actually proposing, or had proposed for these changes.
Very good. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
You gotta get closer to the mic.
Sure. My name again is Scott Doty. I am principal at John G. Crow Associates in Winchester. But for those of you who might be interested, I also live in Bedford, New Hampshire, right behind Manchester Country Club. As I heard my wife is from Manchester. We're here to explain site plan changes that were done on the fly out at the site. My own office was informed of these after they had started, actually, the changes in the plan, and we evaluated them. And I'll go into in a minute. I just want to sort of give you the history. We evaluated them and realized they were going to be changing drainage, and we needed to address that with the Conservation Commission in a positive manner, and saw that there were pavement reductions, and then we learned about lighting changes, as Corinna has mentioned, as the town planner has mentioned. I'd like to go over those with you. I know that the project attorney, Bill Pizzoni, had addressed these on an informal basis with the former building inspector, and the former building inspector had an impression that these changes were not significant. So, Corinna had mentioned to me when we talked last week that it'd be good if you had that in writing, and no, I don't have that in writing, and I don't have Mr. Pizzoni here with me tonight. He's in somewhere in the South Shore tonight, so I'm here on my own. But let me explain the changes, and the hope is that the board sees that these changes are understandable and perhaps insignificant enough that don't require refiling, and but that's obviously the board's decision. I know the camera, I don't know, yeah, the camera, you do have cameras headed towards the plans. I see that. This is an overall...
Hold on a second.
Yep.
Hold on. How do you want to do it, Terry?
How you want me to set up on an easel, Terry?
It's right here.
Yeah. I know that. Thank you. But on the left side, we're okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your help. I know that there usually is an easel here, and now I just saw it in the corner. All right. Are both of these mics live?
Yes.
Okay, great. Allowing me to orient you to this this plan view. I think that it's best if I turn it 90 degrees so that Route 9 is on the south side. It's the upper portion is north. This is Route 9, south of the site. This is the Route 9 driveway. This is the Ken's Foods building. And it was decided that due to the increase in truck activity here, that the driveways that accessed off of the median stripped driveway to the, what I call, I guess, the truck court here, needed to be wider. They needed to add pavement to this section of it. You can see in gray, the blue is where the existing driveways were. The red is where the existing driveway, red outline. And also learned that they decided that, I think had been long asked that by the neighborhood group, this board also, that they close these north loading docks. You may remember there's a sound barrier that was put along the back side here. Some of you may have been on the board for that when it was called necessary and constructed. And so what we found is that with the elimination of those loading docks, we could eliminate pavement and compensate for the driveway addition here in pavement, and also removing some of the building here. And so this area in the back becomes all green. There's a small increase, or there's a 3,300 square foot increase in pavement in the front here in the area that's grayed, minus the increase in green, which is in that green area right here on the left side, plus the additional green space here in the north side of the building added together decreased impervious surface or pavement and roof by more than a half acre on the site. We ran the hydrology on it and saw the positive, which were intuitive and inherent in the fact that we're reducing pavement, is the reduction in volume of runoff and peak rates of runoff from the site overall to the receiving stream and wetlands that are around the site. So in of itself, we saw this as an improvement in low impact design. It's been something we would have liked to have had on the plans originally, but we were understood that the driveways were wide enough here, and we had no idea if they were going to fulfill what had been hoped for in the back here. Associated with these improvements is the fact that, or these changes to the site plan, it was determined that they also would replace the 4 lights that are in this section of the driveway down to Route 9 and put new lighting there. And also there was a need for this wider pavement area here to add 3 lights on in that green island there. And I believe that's you saw that in part of the package that I submitted with my letter last week. This I highlighted, I added some yellow to this because it's kind of difficult to see. The guys who do the photometrics sort of flipped what you might think makes sense. They make the areas that are dark yellow and the areas that are lit white. In terms of the coverages of, this is a photometric, again, the highway to the south. This is the southwest corner of the building. It's a different scale than the previous plan. These are the 4 lights that have been, light poles have been added along the driveway medium from Route 9 to replace the existing ones that were there. And there are 3 lights that have been added on this widened driveway that as it enters into the truck court. All of these other lights on the plan were ones that you had approved prior, include the ones on the edges. In our original submittal, existing lights weren't modeled, just the new lights were modeled, and in terms of the photometrics and the foot candles. So this area here has been widened, but it also needed to be lit because they've had a problem, I guess, in general with novice drivers or drivers that are new to the area staying on the driveways and in the pavements, and they really need to light them better and so they can see the edges in the dark. So these 3 lights have been added. These 4 lights have been replaced with new lights, and I believe you were perhaps provided by the town planner, the photometrics for those lights. Those are the changes that have been made to the site plan and the lighting.
Okay.
I'm here to answer questions you may have.
Sure. So, thanks for coming in and going through this stuff with us and working with the town planner. It would seem to me that perhaps one thing that the board could do is nothing, and just say thanks, have a nice Christmas. We could instruct you to apply for a modification to an approved site plan. The board could not do that and ask that we get final as-bills. You've already submitted the new drainage calcs, is that right?
We did not submit them to the planning department. We had submitted them to through the Conservation Commission. They have been reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill.
So, and then I'm not sure if one of the things the board can do is to instruct you to undo what you've done. I think those are the options that we're looking at tonight. I'll open up to the board. Mr. Mills?
So, first of all, thanks again for coming in, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
We're seeing, I guess, more frequently changes to plans come before us than what originally got approved, so appreciate you coming in. One question, I'm not sure if I heard it completed or not, but did you say the Concom had already reviewed the added pavement piece?
The reduction in pavement, yes. Overall, on the site, the reduction in pavement, yes, they
reduction,
have.
but also where it was added, and
Yes,
they
they
were
have.
comfortable with that?
Yeah. Because I think one of the things I did not mention, Mr. Mills, is the fact that in the reduction,
I'm more concerned about the wetlands that I know.
that's
that
why
is
I think
right
I
there.
think I need to make a point that I forgot to make or didn't make earlier, is that in the reduction overall, it's been a reduction, and the improved the increase, should I say not improved, but the increase in pavement here actually involved the pulling back of pavement from the wetland and the water resources.
Okay.
In this area here, it was actually pulled back.
And they were comfortable with that?
Yes, yes, they were.
You have that in writing, I assume, or?
We did. They amended the order of conditions.
Okay, so they have that. So that's one thing that I think would, Mr. Chairman, what you're saying, if we ask for an amended or as-built, I would be in favor of having that notification that, Concom was in favor of the change in the pavement. The only other question I had was the lighting. How many lights were there before on that barrier from the coming in and going out? You said they got replaced, and on the original one, you never showed it because you weren't planning on changing it, but now, so there are 4 now? And there were how many?
This is the existing, no, this is the pre-construction, let's say pre-approval situation here. I tried to, again, put these about at the same scale. I think I was fairly successful in doing it. There were 4 existing lights on the median strip here. And as far as this area here where they entered into the old truck, what I call the truck court, there were 2 lights in that area. Of course, it's a different configuration, as you may remember from review of the site plan. It's a much larger, more active trucking facility. And so these 4 were replaced. This area here was buttressed. The lights were increased in that area.
I'm more concerned with the lights closer to the road for distraction.
Correct.
Drivers, so.
Correct. So those 4 lights were the 4 existing lights were replaced with new sharp cutoff luminaires, as opposed to what was there, which I might call, I don't mean this in any way, sort of a Chinese hat lantern that had allowed light to go off to the sides instead of sharp cutoff. Now these are sharp cutoff luminaires now.
So,
While you're here, I thought that when the plans were first approved, that there was 1 light and utility poles in that median strip. There was 1 existing light, and then there were utility poles down the rest of that median, and that's why now you're showing 4 lights. Now you show 4 lights in these changes that occurred during construction. So the original approval had 1 light in that median, if I'm not mistaken, because the next,
No, actually, there were 4 light poles. There were 4 light poles on those there were 4 lights in the median strip.
but they weren't included in the photometric plan under the prior approval.
We did not, well, the lighting designer did not model the existing lights out there. They only modeled the proposed lights in our submittal.
Because how do you get the real effect if you don't have the existing light shining and the new light shining? You're not really picking up the whole.
I understand it, but I think these lights were, I guess, there for 40 or 50 years, the existing lights in this median strip. And I don't have no excuse except to tell you that the lighting engineer did not model the existing lights
Okay, because that also.
throughout the entire, and that includes the ones in the back of the building.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, because I was looking at this closer during the day, and to me, the existing condition said utility pole. It didn't say light pole on the,
That's an LP, not a UP, I believe.
all right, well, I'm just pointing that out so the board
Yep.
is aware that, A, they weren't modeled, and B, I wasn't sure they were really lights
Yeah.
there.
There were lights there. Those are light poles, and they weren't modeled.
And then there's now 3 new lights along the reconfigured driveway in addition
That's
to
correct. That's correct, along the island that's between the driveway and the truck.
Okay, just so
The,
that they're
yeah,
clear, because
yeah.
I was looking at it earlier.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
Sorry, Andy. Thank you.
So I've driven by the site multiple times. Even one time I had to pull in there so I could get on my phone and put in directions, and surprised to see a security guard there on a Saturday morning. And they were kind enough to let me do the UE. So and I have a Suburban, so there was enough room to do a UE easily and turn around and
Yep.
give a little once-over. So, I think, again, appreciate you coming in. From my point of view, since there was actually an improvement to the neighbors in the back by the reduction of the loading area, impervious pavement. You moved further away from the wetlands and the lights. I haven't been distracted by them from the street. I'd be in favor of adjusting the as-built and not making him apply again. And there's no increase in traffic or anything like that, so.
No, the use is
would've been
not
nice
changing,
to
no.
know further ahead of time, but
It would have been nice for me also.
it's currently where I'm sitting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jenks?
What is the height of the new lights on that median?
They are the same height as the others that were previously approved. They're 20 feet high.
And they have is the only change the reflector?
I think that these lights are brighter than the ones that were, discussion that Karina and I just had a little while ago, is that the existing lights were not modeled. I would say for sure that these new lights are brighter than the ones, illuminate the driveway more than the prior ones had. But the new ones are the sharp cutoff, sort of what we used to call shoebox style, with the light up inside the luminaire, cutting off the light so it doesn't go 180 degrees in broadside.
How does the photometric illustrate the brighter light? Because it looks to me like it's just what it was.
Well, I just think that I think the lighting fixtures are more efficient these days, and having looked at it, I think it's brighter, but it's more focused on the driveway. The older lights were circa 71, and I think the technology, they're probably energy inefficient by today's standards also, but I think you get much more efficiency and a brighter, more focused light out of today's luminaires. So you can see from the photometric diagram that was prepared that you can see that the lights light that median strip and driveway quite well, and then cut off quite sharply after in terms of decreasing foot candles as it goes off of the paved area towards the lawn or towards Route 9. But I have no doubt in my mind, there's no doubt in my mind that this is a safer design than the lights that were out there. I think I just have a client that just sort of directs the contractor to just take care of this and do it without thinking about the permitting, and here we are. Fortunately, I have to say, fortunately, I don't think it's a detriment, but it's the opinion of the planning board, whether or not they agree with that. That's just my personal opinion, professional opinion. I think it's a safer design, a better design in terms of lighting.
Do we know, Karina, if anyone on the board has seen these lights at night?
I don't believe so, except for, unless Andy went there in the evening when he was looking at it by chance.
How long have the new lights been in?
Probably a month.
Yeah, I've definitely driven by and seen it, not
Yeah.
been distracted.
That would be my only thought, is that we ought to see them before we sign off on them. I don't think this amounts to a change in the site plan that we should be concerned about, provided we get out and see the actual lights and understand that they're not going to bother anyone driving along Route 9.
Yeah.
But the extent of the changes, to me, seems pretty minor.
So normally what we do when we have these site plans and the new, any type of new lighting, we require the 1-year, 4-season trial period, so that might be fine in the summertime, but it might be terrible when all the leaves are gone. It's kind of the other way around, but I suppose we would ask you to agree to make revisions over the next, at some time between now and next October or November.
After you had a full cycle.
Right, it's a
Yeah.
1-year, so if they've been installed for for a month, then we'll start to take a look at them, and we'll agree on a cutoff date that if there's no problems, either they're too bright or they're not bright enough,
Right.
we'll ask you to change it, and then beyond that date, it is what it is. Does that sound good, Mr. Jenks?
Yeah, I think that's good. Another thought on the order of conditions. If conservation has changed the order of conditions, we probably ought to pick up a copy of it, a copy of their changes, and include that with this file.
If I may, Mr. Jenks, also, Mr. Chairman, suggest that we make as part of the file, originally, the drainage calculations were filed with the LID, for the LID permit. Make that, certainly provide those for the planning board file related to the LID permit, thanks.
Thank you.
I think that would be
that would be
reasonable and
good,
prudent
yes.
also. As do I think the year, review of the lighting is also called for and prudent from a professional standpoint.
Right, the town planner and I had a discussion about this earlier today, and there's quite a history with the neighbors. And now there's new neighbors on Kenley, which is right off of Deerfoot. And so it's important that the current and future neighbors will be able to come to the planning office and see the full record, it's accurate, and reflects what's actually built, what's actually there.
Yes.
So she'll work with you to make sure that the package is complete
Good.
if we get to that point. Mr. Stein?
So, my concern is, you know, the planning board and the planning department have a process, and what's fair for one, you know, needs to be fair for all, and I feel like it's a slippery slope when, especially when it comes to photometrics, which is part of the aesthetics of the town. So I certainly understand your position, and if I were a proponent in the same position, I'd probably ask for the same thing. But I'm sitting on the planning board, I'm looking at this from the perspective of the town and the residents and the neighbors, as Mr. Morris just pointed out. And to me, this warrants, it's, you know, it may seem marginal to some, but it's enough to me that a modification with a public hearing is warranted. And that, because if I was a neighbor and the photometrics of a site that I lived near or worked near were going to change, and it happened outside of that process, outside of the normal formal process, and I found out about it after the fact with no public hearing, I might not like that. So I certainly understand my colleagues' comments, and I understand your position, but in this instance, I'm going to voice the, you know, minority opinion, if you will, and just look at it from that perspective that modification with peer review is probably in order.
Thank you. Mrs. Luttrell?
I agree with Mr. Stein. There's a process. And even if this is deemed a minor departure, the process is that the site plan review committee approves it, and then the building inspector can sign off on it. And the request is done to the building department in writing, and then the approval is signed off on and filed with the record. Because, you know, people come to the public hearings, they voice their opinions, they expect things to be built the way that it was approved, that they saw over many, many hearings, and then when all of a sudden something different is done, it's very upsetting. And so if we have the ability to view the lighting over a year, I may be able to be convinced that this is a minor departure, but I would insist that it goes through the correct channels and that a letter goes to the building department requesting the minor departure, and that there's the site plan review committee signs off on it. And all of this is included with the record. That's all.
So, a technical question, the widening of that driveway, how wide is it now?
In that area where it was widened, oh gosh, I don't have that off the top of my head. I do know this. Let's see the scale. Better at me for bring a bit off of here. That it looks like it's been widened to about 40 feet wide from about 24 feet. So it's either 40 or 44 feet wide, I would say, in rough estimation. It has to do with, I think, the turning movement of the trailer cabs and trailers, and their swing to be able to get two side by side, going in opposite directions and being able to make that movement without intersecting each other's travel. There's an S-curve going on there.
Okay, because 44 feet has parking written all over it.
I think that it would be a reasonable, interesting or not, the thought occurred to me also, and And I told my client that I would expect that the board would probably want to reiterate that we have a truck area and we have driveways. And it's not set up to be, they get plenty of parking within that truck corral, so to speak, that they don't need to be parking on driveways and such.
There's
And,
other facilities on Route 9 that use big trucks
yeah.
that have gone through the site plan process here, and one of them is almost within sight of this site,
Okay.
and it's probably been there at least 25 years. And occasionally, despite the site plan saying that certain things can't be parked out in front, we occasionally go by and see certain things parked out in front. So, I don't know if you have the authority to agree that the site plan, the revised plan will say no parking.
I think that I believe that I've mentioned it to the client, and they understand that that it's made for the travel through, not for parking. There are besides the 26 loading docks, there are over 50 places for cabs and trailers to be parking within that enlarged trucking area, court, if what have you, that was approved a year and a half or so ago. I think that it's within certainly an expectation, or within the purview of the board to reiterate and amplify that concern. And I'm going to send that message again to my client on behalf of the board. That's the best I can do, Mr. Chairman, is I can tell them what you say. I can't run the facility for the next forever years.
We're trying to, I'm asking the town planner what the cost difference is between what you've done or plan to do for a submittal for the file.
Yeah.
Versus what Mr. Stein is suggesting, which would still have the same end result of complete, updated, accurate set of plans approved by the planning board in the file for the neighbors and future neighbors to see.
Right.
The difference between that being handled as an as-built and no public hearing, or it being handled with a public hearing, essentially the same documents. And so I think our peer review is a cost that gets passed on to the client. I'm not sure if we would need a peer review in this case because yeah, Fuss and O'Neill's already reviewed the drainage.
That's correct.
And the lighting would have that 1 year. I mean, if we say it's a certain number of lumens, it for most people, they don't, wouldn't know the difference between 15 or 50.
Right. It's more important what is a practical matter with the actual light and how it compares to light that bothers people or bothers operators on the road, or finding the right capacity for what safety calls for in the driveway. I think that
So what's the
understand that.
application fee?
The application fee for modification to an approved major site plan is $520 for the application, for the modification application. And then usually there's an engineering consultant fee, which would typically, for something that might be minor site plan, is $1,200 estimated.
Or the board could waive that.
Or you could waive that.
And then there's the cost to put it in the newspaper and advertise the public hearing.
Correct.
How much
Which
is
is approximately, what, like $300?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking under $1,000 to get a public hearing, get it through a
Right.
public hearing.
Right.
I was,
I think we would be willing to do whatever the board sees fit for us to do. Go through a hearing process, or it's really, I think we're making this request, which makes sense, I think, considering it's, the aspects of the proposal here, asking for the planning board in there to kindly consider us not having to go through a hearing. But should the board decide this is not something that's aggravating to the Ken's Foods, I just want to point that out.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the board from the previous owners and
Right.
the multiple complaints that the neighbors had,
Yeah.
even though Ken's was there before the neighborhood was developed. It's still, it's one of many, many places in the town where the heavy the zoning allows this type of backup alarms and trucks and everything, and it abuts immediately to a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think if you're willing, I don't think the cost is that,
It's
much
not
of a
it's not my
problem.
money, but I don't think it is either.
and since it's already
Considering,
built,
and
we wouldn't
Ken's
be
Food
holding
wants to
up,
be here for a long time.
we wouldn't be
Yes, maybe.
holding up the work, because it's all done.
That's the unfortunate fact, yeah.
So I think I'm leaning with Mr. Stein on this one, where we would ask you to apply for the
Sure.
a public
Certainly.
hearing, a
Mhm.
modification, and we'd have a public hearing.
Allow people, put some advertising there, allow the neighbors to come if they would,
And-
if they would like, and hear it
Okay.
in a normal process. I think it's totally understandable. I don't think that
And
that's
everybody would get
unreasonable at all.
a free salad dressing?
Well, I think there's still, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that offer to have the tour of the,
You remember?
I remember that because I want to be in that tour also, because I have not seen the new robotics systems in the warehouse working yet.
I actually talked to a guy within the last couple of weeks who worked there temporarily, and it was, to hear him describe what goes on in there is fascinating.
Yeah. The other interesting thing, again, just to go sort of on the sidebar a little bit, there were a lot of concerns, I think, at one point that the number of employees would be reduced because of this, and actually it has not. They're just working in a different part. There's that much more activity. I think the number of employees is the same. It's remained the same. It's just that they're at the point of delivery for the robots to the trucks as opposed to being throughout the warehouse. It's quite interesting thing they
So I'll go
learned.
back to the board. I think Mrs. Latrell was, yes, Mimi.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Stein. I think that we should have a hearing. That way we can write our own conditions for the change in lights, that we can look at it for a year, and the no parking. If it goes to the site plan review, we have no authority over them and can't have them make any conditions. So I agree. I think we should have a hearing.
Does anybody want to make it 4-1 or 5-0 on that? Mr. Mills?
I mean, I'm going to be outvoted anyway, but I'll go with it. Again, my point before was that, I think there was an improvement to the neighborhood with the reduction of impervious pavement. We moved away from the wetlands, and there's no increase of traffic, and we're already covered with the lighting, from my view, for a year to see if it was really a distraction, but if the rest of the board wants to do it, I know it. Yes, the process was a little circumnavigated, but, there are minor site plan changes that I think happen typically, but if everyone wants to go forward with it, I'll go along.
Oh, now we're in trouble.
I'm just here to listen.
I'll go along with what Andrew has just said. I think I've got to go back and re-educate myself on the regs, because I wasn't aware that the modification to the site plan that goes to the committee is something that's advertised and there's a public hearing on. So I gotta go back and look at the regs. It's fine with me to do it that way. So we'll make it unanimous.
Are you up to date, Bill?
Somewhat, yeah.
Because we're ready to send you on your way with expecting that you will apply for a formal
We'll go through
modification,
this retroactively.
and there would be a public hearing. And with that, we've been talking about at least two conditions. One would be there'd be no parking in the 44-foot driveway, 44-foot wide driveway. It was widened from 24 to 44, and that tells us that it's very ripe for parking trailers there, short-term or long-term. So that's one of the things that we're concerned about. And the other thing was, of course, the usual 1 year. You guys have revised the lighting, so for every site plan, it's 1 year to take a ability to make adjustments, either make it more lighting or cut it back. We've done this all over town, and it's worked very well. So the board just discussed this, and all five are in favor of asking you to fill out an application for modification to the site plan. There'll be a public hearing, and then we'll see where that takes us. Good? Anything else? Anything else?
Is it just the site plan modification, the lid stands as it is?
I think, at least, I would say that the Conservation Commission has far more detailed review than our lid. And if,
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, in fact, that because the pavement area has been reduced and the drainage is inherent in that is the drainage improvements and the increase in the ability for infiltration, low impact of development criteria are changed in only a positive manner.
does the board agree with that? So,
Didn't we convey that to conservation already?
Yes, and I think that's actually the chairman's point.
so the public hearing would only be site plan.
Site plan.
It would not be another special permit.
Relative to just that lighting component?
No, I think once we open up the public hearing, you're gonna list how you want to modify the original site plan approval
With the reduction in pavement, the widening of the driveway.
and the lights.
And the addition of.
And anything else that you change, like you chopped off 3,000 square feet in the back of the building.
Right.
You're gonna plant grass. So the application will cover those.
Yeah, I think that because we had the building inspector apprised of all this stuff.
Oh, could you also introduce yourself,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. Bill Pizzoni, 1 Admiral's Lane. I am the attorney for Ken's Foods, and I am sorry for being late, but I was in Kingston on a wind farm issue. But, yeah, we had been keeping him apprised, but as you cumulatively add up all these minor changes that he looked at as minor changes, you're right, it might be worthwhile to come in and do a modification and include them all. And that way, we have an approved plan that fits what's there.
So we'll let you prepare that
Yes.
application and work with the town planner, and we'll see you in the next few meetings, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
15.
Thank you, board, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was late.
Next item on the agenda. Hold on a second. Next item on the agenda is Isla Bella Estates Covenant Extension Vote. This is a discussion item. I'll ask the town planner to give us a little history on this and where we're gonna go with this tonight and in the future.
If you recall, back in the fall of 2017, Bartolini Builders came forward with a request to extend the time frame of their covenant for Isla Bella Estates. Let me just grab my file. In the original covenant, which is provided after a subdivision is approved, to make sure that the construction of the subdivision happens within 2 years of approval. That was signed on October 15th of 2015, which meant that his period to complete construction for Isla Bella was October of 2017. Therefore, in 2017, he came and asked for a 2-year extension to the covenant, which the planning board voted on and approved. And a document was endorsed. And recently, we were going through some conditions of the approval to make sure things were moving forward. And I looked up the endorsed document. It was recorded. However, it was never filed with town clerk. So it needed to be, town clerk needs an original signed extension of covenant from the planning board. So I anticipated that it would just simply be a revote of the same terms. However, we wanted to just do a little bit more research, and Jack Bartolini himself also wanted to check with his attorney to see if he had the form as well, the original form. So he asked if we could continue this discussion to the next meeting in January to give him some time to get with his attorney and look through his file. And that might solve the problem much quicker.
Any questions or comments on this? Okay. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item, 2018 Master Plan. I'll ask the town planner to update us on the status of the Master Plan update.
Okay, I'll just briefly introduce where we are, and then Pam Rivera, my assistant, is going to talk a little bit more how she's been working with Mimi on the progress of that. Last time we were here, the planning board voted to establish the Master Plan Committee with a charge. That was filed with the town clerk's office, and a draft email had been created to extend an invitation for committee members, for interested people to come and join that committee. And at that point, some more work was done, so I'll let Pam explain from the, when you sent the email out forward. You get it?
Thank you. So we sent out the email last Friday to all of the committees that we had identified. I did not have an email for the school committee, but I do have it now, and sent that out to them today. A couple of questions have come back asking whether it needs to be a board member or if it can be somebody that a board member suggests or nominates, I guess. So that was a question that came up today from Conservation as well as from the school committee. So I want to put that out there to the board and ask what your feedback is on that. We have had a couple of people come forward, and we'll be looking to do appointments on the meeting of the 7th for the start of who has volunteered to be a part of the committee. So we're working on getting an online form put onto our website that we'll be able to put out through Twitter as well as through the My Southborough to get members at large. So that's kind of just a brief update of where we are right now.
Excellent. Did you have anything, Mrs. Luttrell?
That's what I said. Okay.
Nothing except for reading back through the minutes, I realized that I volunteered to be a co-chair, and I'm waiting for my other co-person to volunteer.
Let's see if there's anyone in the audience.
Crickets.
Guess not. Thank you, Mrs. Latrell, for reminding us that there's still some work to be done in getting a co-chair. Is there anything else on this?
I think in response to the conservation, I think that we want somebody from that commission and someone from the school committee. And I was wondering if we should reach out to the ADA committee too. I hadn't thought of them, but I know they're trying to have their ADA in the figuring out how it can work in with zoning and permitting. And
I heard that they're going to be working with the new building commissioner on ADA aspects too.
So, Pam, would you be getting back to those two that asked about an actual member or a volunteer will you be getting back to them?
Yes,
Okay.
I will. Do we need to, if we're adding the ADA, do we need to resubmit this? Because it was filed with the committees that we had identified.
There may be a representative from one of the other committees who's also on the ADA committee. In other words, if Board of Selectmen recommends somebody who's also on the ADA committee, it might answer that. A redundant role, like some of the other ones, like Andy had said last time, CPC and some other committees,
Open space.
open space, it's the same person.
Next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board. The planner's report.
Okay. I'll try to keep it short. The first topic, I just want to update the board on 144, 154 Turnpike Road and the driveway connection between those properties in reference to the approvals that were done. We are hoping to get that discussion item on either the 7th or the 28th of January so that the property owner can attend. We did see in the approvals for 144 Turnpike Road, there was not supposed to be any access to Breakneck Hill Road. In addition, 134 Turnpike Road had a zoning board decision which also referenced no access to Breakneck Hill Road. So just a quick update, that'll be coming up on the meeting in January, and we'll find out if it's going to be sooner or later in January. Number 2, the public safety building. They had in the interim put out RFP for solar collectors on the canopies for the police parking. That has since gone by the wayside, and they'll be back to just the original approved site plan of 19 spaces, canopy spaces for the police department. Andy had asked about that a few meetings ago. So no worries there, it's back to the regular site plan, no changes. Kane's Crossing,
Well, anything
Yeah.
on the sign?
no, not yet, but I'll follow up with that.
They still working on
I
it?
think they're still working on that.
Okay.
Yep. But I'll double check sign status. Jack Bartolini had asked me what it might involve if he were to ask to take one of the townhouses and split it into 2 separate units instead of one unit with 2 dwelling units, one house with 2 dwelling units in it. I said I would kind of query the board. To me, initially, I thought it would be a modification if he separates anything more than 10 feet and changes the site plan. Because we're kind of in an interim with the building commissioner, there hasn't been easy to have a go-to person to ask there at this point. So I was wondering if anyone had an opinion on that from the board.
Sorry, what location is that?
This is Kane's Crossing. It's at the corner of Southville and Parkerville. It's the 55-plus development that was approved about a year and a half ago. There were 11 units on a driveway in with a round driveway. So one of those units he was just querying, just initial trying to find out what it might take if he wanted to split one of the buildings into two. Yes, instead of a townhouse, he wanted to make so he has sets of 2 townhouses, right? He has like duplexes, I should say, but they're townhouses. He wanted to separate one to make an individual unit, 2 units out of one. Yeah, that's it. So basically, by taking the building and separating, I mean, we would have to probably see some kind of concept plan to determine where that is happening and how it impacts the driveway and the utilities. At least a concept for discussion before any determination if it's a modification or not. Because then you could determine what big a change it is, how much of a change. So perhaps I could maybe advise him that if he is still interested in that, to come up with a sketch of some sort to demonstrate what he's wants to do.
Did he say anything about why he wants to do that? Is it a construction reason or marketing or?
I think it's more for marketing. I don't believe it was for any conflict with anything to do with construction.
Are you sure of that, or? are
I'm
you
not
guessing?
sure. I'm guessing based on our conversation that was relatively quick. But again, I can ask him about that as well. And again, it was very cursory question.
Yeah, I drove by there the other day, and it's, the site work has begun. Right, yeah.
It's better now, though. When they initially started, it was very, very rainy and still pretty warm. And they've cleaned up the construction entrance. I know that the conservation agent has been working out there and monitoring that. You know, there was a little bit of dust getting on the road, and I believe he's cleaned that up. So. Okay. Good with that. The next item is 10 Turnpike Road. They'll be coming in for applications for major site plan and lower impact development for an all-American storage facility. So they'll be converting that to a 3-story storage facility is the intent. Conservation agent and I met with them again to review their draft application submittal to make sure that everything is complete before they submit.
What building is that?
10 Turnpike is, you know, a 6 to 8 is the repair facility, the auto repair that came before us with the lighting. Yeah, it's it's on the side of that.
Remember the guy came in and said that
Sorry?
people didn't know if the
Line exchange is there,
Bottom line exchange, yeah.
used furniture.
So they'll be adding, they have a variance for some setback issues, but they'll be adding a big, relatively large addition to the rear of the property. As you know, the slope goes up pretty steep behind that building. So they're proposing kind of like it's going to be 3 stories, or appears to be, and then they'll have like a lane that drives underneath and through the building for loading and unloading through this new addition. It's going to be what they referenced as like a high-end storage facility.
Are they going to need any zoning relief to do that?
They've already been to the zoning board for special permit for building more than 50,000 square feet. in that zone. They were there in July, August timeframe. I have pretty good file on that project already in my office because they approached the planning department back in January of this year with some preliminary layouts, and I met the owner and his engineer and their attorney. So right now they're working out some deficiencies in the application before they actually submit. But feel free to come by and I can show you what they're planning to do. Or I can bring it to the next meeting and as part of the planner's report and show you a little more. Okay, any other questions on that? No, good, all right. The Planning Board's 2019 schedule of planning board meetings is on the website now, so if anybody wants to see that again. We received a memo, well, actually, Dawn received a memo from the Recreation Commission, and they copied me on it regarding a request to come before the planning board to discuss the Mooney ball fields and the Richardson tennis court lighting at the Neary School. They had submitted an application. The application was not complete, so they took their information back and were going to figure out what to do next. And this is their next step. They want to come before the planning board again, I believe, to try to say they don't need major site plan. So we offered them, you know, what date would they prefer, and they said the 28th would be good for them. So they'll be coming to that meeting to state their case.
So, just, as we talked about this, I think, at the CPC, and our recollection was that when it was conveyed on the town meeting floor, that it was stated that they were gonna go for site plan at town meeting. So, it would be interesting if that didn't occur.
Yes, and I think others have mentioned that as well in discussing these potential projects in front of the planning board.
Is that an issue between major and minor review, or is it no review?
Could I read an excerpt from the memo? In a memo to Don Morris, Planning Board Chair, from the Recreation Commission, dated December 12, 2018, regarding the Mooney Field and Richardson Court lights, in the fourth paragraph, it indicates, "We do not believe that major site plan approval is required. Although we will provide most of the information needed and will perform the notifications required for the process, the Conservation Commission reviewed the town's request for determination of applicability at the tennis courts, and the commissioner's determination was negative with conditions, and the town has hired an electrical engineer to design, oversee the work being performed at both sites." In this memo, they also reference, and just to be clear, the first paragraph says, "The Recreation Commission is requesting a meeting with the Planning Board to discuss the Mooney Field and Richardson Court at Neary Lights project. As discussed and written in the March 31st, 2014 Planning Board meeting, and as promised at the 2018 annual town meeting." So I looked up the meeting minutes of that time, and there's a copy of that in your packet, and I highlighted a section which indicated that at the time, they had presented to the zoning board for the lighting projects and the lights being 70 feet tall. They had no physical site plan of the site. A couple of the board members agreed they did not think proposal required full submittal, but it does need a public hearing to ensure that residents are allowed to voice their concerns. Well, a minor site plan doesn't require a public hearing, but a major site plan does. And it seemed to me that that's what it stated there. So just another point of reference in addition to what the CPC required at town meeting or was contingent upon the funding for that project. So we're hoping, you know, that maybe with additional information and feedback from the board, they will understand that major site plan is necessary, you know, not only for the abutters, which is very important that they see what's happening here as well, but also for safety reasons. In my past experience, when ball fields with lights are designed, there's typically, and I haven't seen it without, a registered landscape architect or a professional engineer who develops the plan with the electrical engineer so that there are no conflicts with wires touching the wrong things, generators too close to fences, chain link fences, and safety issues like that. Handholds in the outfield, poles being in the outfield, all that are safety hazards for the children and adults who play there. And having experience in my prior position, we designed a large recreation complex with multiple fields, soccer fields, ball fields, lit with very tall lights. And all those fields required not only us as a civil engineer and an electrical engineer on board, we also had a landscape architect who was well-versed in ball field layout, recreational design. It's a whole topic in itself, and there's all kinds of constraints and restrictions in where you place things and how the distances have to be, which is important, which an electrical engineer may not have complete experience with. So it's just to cover all the bases for safety. So I'll get off my post. But that's why I think it's very important. You know, not only the process, which the bylaw says this is the process you have to take, it's just like an intuitive thing that it's important. So. Okay. The next item is, in your packet, we included a draft annual warrant for upcoming special town meetings so that you could already see what's included for your leisure for reading. And that's all I have, but we do have meeting minutes.
Thank you very much, Karina. Very well organized and well stated. Thank you. Thank you very much, Karina. Very well organized and very well stated. Mr. Mills.
Make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from June 4th, 2018 as written.
Second. I had some,
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Mrs. Luttrell.
with edits.
Okay, with edits.
Yeah, I sent them. I don't remember what they were.
I have a comment on line 58. I think the word "to" needs to be inserted after the word "up." And then go ahead, Mrs. Luttrell, did you find yours?
I just want to point out that these were drafted already, and I did a very quick cursory review for Pam. So if you haven't had a full chance to look at it, you know, these are kind of some of the first few meeting minutes from Pam. So I just wanted you to be aware that I made a few spelling corrections here or there that I saw firsthand, but I felt important that the planning board get these in front of them right away to pick up all the changes at once, or revisions you may have.
I think it's important that these get approved, unless there's a showstopper in here, is to get these approved and on the website, and if at a later date we decide that there's something has to be changed, we can change it and issue a new set to the website.
submit them afterwards?
I emailed them to Pam.
Okay.
They were just little things.
So I changed my motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 4th, 2018 as amended. And that was seconded by Mimi, I think.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Discussion on line 215 was my other item there. It says, planning board re-adjourned.
Just say resumed.
Planning board went back into session at 8:45. Anything else? Nothing else? All in favor? 5, 4, 2, 0. And 4 to 1. Mr. Jenks wasn't there. Mr. Mills,
I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from October 15th, 2018. Did you amend these already, Mimi? As amended.
Second?
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5 to 0. Mr. Mills,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from October 29th, 2018 as written.
Second?
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5 to 0. Very good. Next item on the agenda is our next meeting is January 7th. You got the agenda there for that one,
Yes.
Karina? So we have the 0 Furman Ave public hearing. That's what we extended to 7 PM. And then there's some discussion items so far, Chestnut Meadow subdivision, the master plan, which will probably be on every agenda from now into the future. And then, what was that one? Oh,
Approval of master plan committee, appointment of master plan committee, people who want to join that committee. If there are any, we can start appointing them. And then also we'll have Isla Bella Estates again for the covenant extension if required.
Mr. Mills,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the planning board have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5 to 0. Very good. We're gonna have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. That's good.
You too. Who seconded that? Was that Jesse? All right, all right.
Is there anyone from the public before we entertain a motion?
Public comment. Sam Stivers, Presidential Drive. I heard the earlier comments about the access to Breakneck Hill Road from the office park there near White's Corner. I was on the zoning board that actually voted for the variance that allowed the construction of the last building in there. And the deal was hinged on no traffic access to Breakneck Hill Road. That was what made the residents get on board one piece of it, in addition to some conservation land and conservation restriction there. But it was a difficult thing to organize and overcome the public resistance to a number of prior proposals for that piece of property. And in fact, it was actually interesting. I saw Mr. Pizzoni on the way out as I came in here. He represented Capital Group on that one, and he was the author of 16 conditions attached to that variance that clearly stated no traffic access to Breakneck Hill Road, and that was clearly the intent of the parties. So that decision is out there in the file someplace. If anybody wants it, I'm happy to dig it out. But it's listed under 0 Breakneck Hill Road, and it was done in late 2004. I think this decision was issued in January of 2005. So again, at the time, there was absolutely no question about the intent of the zoning board to issue that variance and about the public, the neighbors who were supporting it. So if any question comes up, I'd be glad to talk about that more. Thank you.
Did I send that to you, Karina?
Excuse me?
Hold on a second, Sam.
Yes, you, Mimi brought that to our attention, and we looked in the files to find those decisions and found the one for 134 Turnpike Road. And at that point, we also discovered that 0 Breakneck Hill Road was another address, and then 122 Turnpike Road was also another address reference for the same property, because it was originally one large property that got put into 3 parcels in an A&R in the 2004 timeframe, I think, in which 132 and 134 were created, but the larger section, which now is 136, was fronting on 0 Breakneck Hill Road.
And so the ZBA decision was written under 0 Breakneck Hill Road, and was, again, the piece that abutted the White's Corner place there and had the access to Breakneck Hill Road. And regardless of whatever happened on the rest of that site, it was the ZBA's intention, very clearly, that nothing goes through that property to Breakneck Hill Road. So whatever happens on the rest of the site was not the subject of that particular decision. Thanks.
All right.
Anyone else? Sure there's no one in the audience that wants to speak? I'm just waiting for Terry. Okay. Mr. Mills?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 5-0, we're adjourned.